Welcome back. Tonight we drift through the sleepy streets of ancient Egypt. So wherever you are, however your day has been, you have nothing to do now but rest. There are no twists tonight, nothing to follow, nothing you need to remember in the morning. A city of warm stone and dry sands, settling into the quiet beneath a cooling desert dusk. We'll drift slowly, in no hurry to be anywhere at all. If these journeys help you rest, you're welcome to follow along, but only if you'd like to. And if you're listening now, leave the name of your city and the time where you are. Wherever you're listening from, you're in good company tonight. So let yourself settle. Let your shoulders soften, and let your eyes close whenever they're ready. Breathe in slowly, and let it go. There's no need to stay awake for any of this. Just let the streets of ancient Egypt come to you. Long before the first pharaohs, the land here looked very different. The vast Sahara was once a green savanna, but the climate began to change. The rain stopped falling. The grassland slowly turned to dust. Nomadic cattle herders had to move. They left the expanding desert behind. They walked until they found water. They gathered along the muddy banks of the Nile. This long river became their only lifeline. They set up small camps in the reeds. Over time, these camps turned into permanent villages. People learned to plant seeds in the wet earth. They stopped wandering and built homes from mud and straw. The harsh desert had forced them together. This narrow strip of green became a crowded refuge. It was a simple shift in the weather. Yet it sparked the birth of an entire civilization. You can still see the stark edge where the sand meets the soil. The river they found was a rare geographic gift. It flowed steadily from south to north. This made the journey downriver incredibly easy. You just let the current carry your boat. But the real magic was in the air. The prevailing winds blew from north to south. If you wanted to go upriver, you simply raised a sail. The wind pushed you against the current. This natural two-way highway changed everything. It connected a 600-mile ribbon of isolated villages. Travel was cheap and almost effortless. News and goods moved quickly up and down the water. People began to share the same customs and beliefs. Without this perfect balance of wind and water, the region might have stayed fractured. Instead, the river naturally zipped the settlements together. It forged a single, cohesive state out of a long desert canyon. The water itself became the spine of the nation. Every year, the river swelled and spilled over its banks. This annual flood was a quiet, predictable miracle. The water carried millions of tons of rich silt from the southern highlands. When the flood retreated, it left a thick layer of dark mud behind. The people called this fertile ground the Black Land. It was where all life happened. Crops grew thick and green in the dark soil. But just a few steps away, the landscape changed instantly. The floodwaters only reached so far. Where the mud stopped, the barren desert began. They called this dry expanse the Red Land. The dividing line was sharp and visible. You could stand with one foot in lush wheat and the other in dead sand. This stark contrast shaped how they saw the world. The Black Land was for the living. The Red Land was where they built their silent tombs. As villages grew into towns, location became everything. A settlement called Hierakonpolis rose to power early on. It sat at a very specific bend in the river. This was the exact spot where dusty overland trails met the water. These trails led deep into the eastern hills. Traders brought gold and precious stones down from the desert. At the same time, riverboats arrived from the southern frontier. They carried exotic goods from distant lands. Hierakonpolis became the ultimate crossroads. It was the place where desert wealth met river traffic. The town grew rich from taxing and trading these goods. Mud brick walls expanded outward. Small shrines grew into large temples. The local rulers gained immense power and influence. They used this wealth to unite the surrounding lands. A simple geographic intersection created one of the first true cities. It set the stage for the great kings to come. When the northern and southern lands finally united, they needed a new capital. They chose a spot called Memphis. The location was no accident. It sat exactly where the narrow river valley suddenly fans out. To the south, the land is a tight green canyon. To the north, it spreads into a wide, flat delta. Memphis acted as a geographic hinge between these two very different worlds. It was the perfect place to control the entire country. Every boat traveling between the delta and the valley had to pass by. The city grew into a massive, sprawling hub. It was filled with palm-shaded courtyards and busy docks. The rulers could easily send messages or troops in any direction. By sitting right on the seam of the landscape, Memphis held the two halves of the nation together. It remained a vital center of power for thousands of years. Just across the water from the early capital, the earth held a hidden treasure. The hills at Tura were made of pure, high-quality limestone. This stone was brilliant white and incredibly smooth. Its location dictated the look of the most famous monuments in history. When builders constructed the Great Pyramids at Giza, they used rough local stone for the core. But they wanted the outside to shine. So they sent workers across the river to Tura. They cut massive blocks of the bright white stone. They loaded them onto wooden sledges, and ferried them over the water. These blocks became the smooth outer casing of the pyramids. In the bright desert sun, the finished tombs gleamed like polished glass. They could be seen from miles away. The natural geology of that specific riverbank gave the ancient skyline its iconic, blinding glow. The landscape provided the perfect paint. Far to the south, the smooth river hit a sudden obstacle. At Aswan, a massive wall of jagged granite boulders choked the water. This rough stretch was called the First Cataract. The river swirled and crashed through the dark rocks. Boats could not easily pass this point. It formed a natural, impassable barrier. This rocky wall permanently defined the southern border of the early state. It was a clear line drawn by nature. On an island just above the rapids, they built a fortress city. They called it Elephantine. It sat quietly on the rocks, watching the southern frontier. The granite boulders acted as a natural moat and shield. The city became a secure trading post and a military garrison. It was the gateway to the lands further south. The rough geology of the riverbed created a perfect, ready-made fortress. It kept the heartland safe from surprise attacks. Over time, the rulers wanted to expand their reach southward, but the jagged rocks of the First Cataract stood in their way. Heavy transport barges could not navigate the swirling rapids. Military troops and stone blocks had to be unloaded and dragged over land. This was slow and exhausting work. So engineers decided to change the landscape. They carved a navigable canal directly through the solid granite. It was a massive undertaking. They cut a clean, narrow channel right along the edge of the river. Water rushed smoothly through the new gap. Now, wooden barges could be carefully guided through the rocks with ropes. The treacherous barrier was finally broken. Heavy cargo and large armies could move easily into the southern lands. This single cut in the stone opened up a whole new world of trade and conquest. Human will had finally bypassed the river's natural wall. With the river open, trade from the deep south began to flow freely. The rulers wanted to tightly control this new wealth. They built a massive stronghold called Buchen just past the border. It was not a simple outpost. It was a towering mud-brick fortress with thick, crenellated walls. It had deep dry moats and narrow arrow slits. The design was incredibly advanced and intimidating. It stood starkly against the empty desert. The fortress existed for one main reason. It managed the lucrative flow of luxury goods moving north. Traders brought ivory, dark ebony wood, and fragrant incense from distant lands. Every boat and caravan had to stop at the fortress walls. The guards inspected the cargo and collected heavy taxes. Buhen was a physical lock on the river. It ensured that the wealth of the south only reached the capital on the king's strict terms. The demand for wealth pushed people far away from the comfortable river. Deep in the eastern desert, the dry canyons hid rich veins of quartz and gold. This harsh, waterless landscape dictated where remote mining towns were built. These settlements were small and rough. Workers lived in simple stone huts, tucked into the rocky hillsides. The sun beat down relentlessly on the narrow mine shafts. Dust coated everything. These isolated towns existed for a single purpose. They funded the empire's massive building projects. The gold dug from these dark rocks paid for towering statues and grand temples back home. Every ounce of treasure was carried out on the backs of donkeys. The miners rarely saw the lush green fields of the valley. They lived and died in the dry heat. Their quiet, grueling labor in the deep desert built the shining monuments that lined the distant riverbanks. Moving goods across the desert required natural highways. The Wadi Hammamat was a wide, dry riverbed that wound through the dark mountains. It formed a perfect, flat road connecting the river to the Red Sea coast. Caravans of traders and donkeys moved slowly through this rocky valley. They carried stone, gold, and exotic imports. Where this dusty trail finally met the water, a city called Koptos grew. It sat right at the end of the desert road. Because of this, Koptos became a wealthy, cosmopolitan trading hub. It was the place where weary travelers finally rested. Desert guides mixed with river merchants in the busy streets. The city thrived simply because it sat at the exit of a dry canyon. The natural geography of the winding valley funneled all the eastern trade directly to its gates. It turned a quiet riverbend into a bustling center of commerce. Sometimes, the landscape was deliberately reshaped to create new wealth. The Fayoum was once a wild, tangled swamp. It was a low-lying basin filled with crocodiles and thick reeds. It sat just west of the main river valley. Engineers saw an opportunity in this wild marsh. They noticed a natural channel that connected the swamp to the river. They decided to widen and deepen this earthen cut. When the annual flood came, water rushed through the new canal. It deliberately diverted the floodwaters into the deep basin. The wild swamp was transformed into a massive, calm, artificial lake. The surrounding land became incredibly fertile. Soon, newly planted fields of grain stretched out in every direction. Small farming estates popped up along the quiet shores. A dangerous marsh became the most productive agricultural basin in the country. It was a masterpiece of ancient landscape engineering. During a dark period, northern Egypt was occupied by foreign invaders. The ruling families had to flee. They moved their capital far to the south, to a city called Thebes. The location was chosen for its safety. Thebes was remote and isolated. It sat nestled against towering, rugged limestone cliffs. The narrow river valley here made it easily defensible. Enemy armies would have to march for weeks through hostile territory to reach it. The cliffs provided a natural wall at their backs. In this quiet, secure refuge, the rulers slowly rebuilt their strength. Thebes grew from a sleepy provincial town into a fortified royal center. The isolation that made it safe also made it powerful. When the kings finally marched north to take back their country, they left from these very gates. Thebes remained the spiritual heart of the empire, long after the invaders were gone. As Thebes grew in power, its rulers began to build. They started a temple complex called Karnak. Over 2,000 years, almost every king added to it. They built towering stone pylons, massive halls, and endless courtyards. This continuous construction physically shifted the center of gravity in the city. Karnak became a sprawling city of stone within the city of mud brick. It was so massive that it pulled the residential neighborhoods toward it. The flat-roofed houses and narrow dirt streets organically hugged the sacred precinct. The daily life of the people wrapped tightly around the expanding walls. The temple was the economic engine of the area. It employed thousands of priests, bakers, and craftsmen. The sheer mass of the stone structures anchored the entire urban layout. The city did not just surround the temple. It clung to it, shaped entirely by the endless building projects inside. The rulers in Thebes needed a new place to bury their dead. They wanted to hide their tombs from robbers. They found a deep, hidden desert canyon just across the water. It was silent and shadowed in the late afternoon. But the real reason they chose this spot was in the sky. A towering, naturally triangular mountain peak loomed directly over the canyon. It was called Al-Khorn. Against the clear blue sky, it looked exactly like a giant pyramid. This natural shape provided a symbolic pyramid for the kings. They did not need to build one out of stone. The mountain itself watched over them. They carved their tombs deep into the pale limestone cliffs below. The hidden valley offered perfect secrecy, while the peak above offered the traditional sacred shape. It was a brilliant use of natural geography. The landscape itself became their final monument. Further north, another sacred site required a different kind of engineering. The temples of Abydos were incredibly important. But they were built far inland, sitting right on the edge of the deep desert. This made it difficult for pilgrims and priests to reach the sanctuary by boat. The journey over the hot sand was long and dusty. So ancient engineers dug a long, quiet canal. It cut straight through the dry earth. It connected the distant waters of the river directly to the temple steps. Now, sacred boats could float peacefully all the way to the sanctuary. The canal was lined with sparse palm trees. It brought a ribbon of life into the barren sand. The water reflected the massive stone columns in the late afternoon sun. This simple trench bridged the gap between the busy river and the silent desert. It brought the gods closer to the water. One king decided to break away from all the old traditions. His name was Akhenaten. He wanted to worship a single sun god. He abandoned the ancient capital and sailed north to find a new home. He chose a vast, flat expanse of desert, enclosed by a semicircle of cliffs. He built his new city, Amarna, right there in the sand. He chose this empty bay for a very specific reason. It belonged to no previous god. It carried no historical baggage. It was a completely blank slate. The builders laid out a planned city in a neat grid. They built pristine white stone temples open to the sky. They constructed sprawling mud brick palaces. The bright, direct sunlight bathed the new streets. For a brief moment, this isolated patch of sand became the center of the world. It was a city born entirely from one man's radical vision. The dream of the Sun City did not last long. Just a decade after the radical king died, the grand experiment ended. The royal court packed up and left. They returned to the old gods and the old capital in the south. Amarna was simply abandoned. The wide streets fell silent. Wooden doors were left open to the desert breeze. Without people to maintain them, the sprawling mud brick palaces began to crumble. The wind blew sand through the empty halls. The mud bricks slowly melted back into the earth. The pristine stone temples were torn down for building materials. In just a few years, the bustling capital became a ghost town. It was a sudden, quiet end to a massive undertaking. The desert quickly reclaimed the land. The city that was built on a blank slate was wiped clean once again, leaving only faint outlines in the dust. When the empire expanded its reach into foreign lands, the capital moved again. This time, it shifted far to the north, into the lush delta. They built a massive new city called Pi-Ramesses. It was positioned beside a wide river branch. This city was not built for quiet worship. It was designed specifically to serve as a military staging ground. The location put the king's armies much closer to the eastern borders. They could deploy rapidly into the Levant. The city was bustling and loud. It featured massive mud brick armories and wide parade grounds. Rows of wooden chariots were parked outside heavy stone barracks. Soldiers drilled in the early morning sun. Bronze weapons clanked in the workshops. Ramesses was a machine of war, disguised as a capital. Its geography allowed the empire to strike quickly and maintain its grip on distant territories. It was a fortress of power. Nature eventually defeated the great military capital. The river branch that fed Ramesses slowly began to fill with silt. The water grew shallow and muddy. Boats could no longer reach the docks. The city was dying of thirst. Instead of abandoning their home, the people did something incredible. They dismantled the entire city. They took down the colossal stone temples piece by piece. They loaded massive carved columns and sections of statues onto heavy wooden barges. They floated these huge stones downriver to a new location. They used the old pieces to build a brand new city called Tanis. It was a massive recycling project. The old monuments were reassembled in a new landscape. The drying riverbed was left behind. The ghosts of the old capital lived on in the streets of the new one. The city physically moved to follow the retreating water. As the centuries passed, power shifted entirely to the delta. A city called Sais rose to prominence as the new capital. Its strategic location made it incredibly wealthy. It sat on a western branch of the river, close to the sea. This spot allowed Sais to control the lucrative Mediterranean trade. Foreign merchant ships docked at its wooden piers. The markets filled with olive oil, wine and silver. But the location offered another unique advantage. It was very easy to hire Greek mercenaries from across the sea. Greek armor became a common sight on the city guards. Sais blended traditional stone temples with a new, international atmosphere. It looked outward toward the sea, rather than inward toward the desert. The city thrived by embracing the changing world. Its position on the water made it a powerful, wealthy gateway between the ancient river and the rising Mediterranean powers. Not all delta cities survived the shifting landscape. The wealthy port of Tanis Heraklion was built right at the edge of the sea. It was a grand city of heavy stone temples and towering statues. But it was built on a fragile foundation. The city sat on low-lying, unstable clay islands in the marsh. For centuries, it was the main entry point for Greek trade. Then, disaster struck. A massive earthquake shook the coast. The shaking caused the waterlogged clay beneath the city to liquefy. The solid ground simply turned to soup. The heavy stone buildings could not be supported. The entire city sank beneath the dark waves of the Mediterranean. The grand port vanished almost instantly. The sea swallowed the temples, the statues, and the busy docks. It was a stark reminder of nature's power. The wealth of the city was no match for the unstable earth beneath it. When new rulers took control, they wanted a capital that faced their homeland. They built Alexandria, right on the Mediterranean coast. They deliberately placed it away from the main river valley. This location was a bold statement. It faced outward, connecting the country's vast wealth to the Greek maritime world. It turned its back on the deep desert and the ancient traditions. Alexandria became a grand, Hellenistic-style harbor city. White marble colonnades lined the streets. Stone piers jutted into the deep blue sea. Wooden trading ships from all over the known world anchored in the bay. The city was bright, loud, and incredibly diverse. It was a place of scholars, merchants and sailors. By choosing the coast over the river, the new kings changed the focus of the entire nation. They tied the ancient land firmly to the bustling modern world of the Mediterranean Sea. The new kings also looked south, but for a very specific reason. They needed heavy cavalry for their wars. They built a chain of specialized fortresses along the barren Red Sea coast. One of these remote outposts was Berenice Troglodytica. It sat in a harsh, sun-baked landscape. The fort existed solely to capture and import war elephants from the deep south. The outpost featured large reinforced wooden corrals. Wide stone ramps led down to the water. Specialized transport ships anchored in the bay, waiting to load the massive animals. The journey was incredibly difficult and dangerous. The elephants were brought up the coast and marched across the desert to the river. This strange, isolated town was a vital part of the military machine. It was a bizarre intersection of wild nature and imperial ambition. The dry coastal winds constantly battered the wooden gates of the elephant pens. As the empire faded, the old ways slowly died out. New religions took over the northern cities. Roman edicts banned the worship of the ancient gods. But far to the south, one place held on. The island of Philae became the last stronghold of the old religion. It sat surrounded by the dark waters of the river, near the southern border. Its isolated position kept it out of reach of the new laws. The towering stone pylons and colonnades remained open. At night, the flickering orange glow of braziers still lit the temple walls. Priests continued to carve the ancient symbols into the stone. The island was quiet, serene, and deeply traditional. It survived simply because it was too far away for the authorities to care. For a few more centuries the old gods lived on in this remote river sanctuary. It was a peaceful, lingering twilight. Where the Nile meets the sea, the ancient coastline holds quiet memories of light. The city of Alexandria once guided sailors home with a massive beacon. Its famous lighthouse stood tall against the dark water. At the very top, a roaring fire burned through the night. But the real secret was a giant mirror. It was likely made of highly polished bronze. During the day, this heavy metal disc caught the bright sun. It reflected the daylight far out across the waves. At night it caught the flames and threw their warm glow for miles. You can almost picture the heavy smoke drifting into the salty air. The light would sweep across the dark waves like a steady heartbeat. It was a simple, but brilliant piece of engineering. The bronze surface required constant polishing to keep its shine. Workers must have spent hours rubbing the metal smooth. The light gave comfort to tired crews. Just inland from that vanished harbor, the ground hides a much quieter space. The catacombs of Komelshokafa sit deep beneath the modern streets. To enter this underground world, you must walk down a wide spiral staircase. It winds slowly around a deep central shaft. This circular well was not just for air or light. It was a clever way to move things safely. Long ago, people used ropes in this open center to lower heavy weights. They carefully guided bodies down into the three-story necropolis. The spiral steps allowed families to walk down alongside them. The air grows cooler with every step you take into the earth. The sounds of the city fade away completely. Down here, the stone walls hold a deep and restful silence. The carved rooms blend different styles of art into something new. It feels like a secret pocket of time hidden just below the busy sidewalks. Further south along the river, the landscape changes to soft green fields. The ancient capital of Memphis once stood proudly in this fertile valley. Today the great city is mostly gone. Its buildings were made of simple mud brick. Over the centuries, the river naturally rose and soaked the ground. The rising water tables slowly dissolved the old brick walls. The houses and palaces simply melted back into the damp earth. Now, only a quiet grove of tall date palms remains. The ground is covered in soft dirt and fallen green fronds. If you walk through the trees, you will find scattered pieces of the past. Massive stone statues rest quietly in the shade. Beautifully carved column bases sit half buried in the soil. The stone survived the water, but the city itself washed away. It is a peaceful place to wander. The dappled sunlight falls gently across the faces of forgotten kings in the grove. Just west of those palm trees, the dry desert plateau begins. This is Saqqara, a vast landscape of pale sand and ancient stone. The famous step pyramid of Djoser stands here against the open sky. It did not start out as a towering monument. The architect Imhotep first designed a traditional flat-roofed tomb. It was a simple, single-story structure made of stone. But he decided to add another layer on top. Then he added another, and another. He kept stacking smaller layers, until the shape changed completely. By pure accident of design, it became the world's first monumental stone structure. The six-stepped tiers rise like a giant staircase. The limestone blocks catch the soft light of dawn beautifully. It is amazing to think this iconic shape was not the original plan. It was just a series of creative choices. Those choices built a mountain of stone that still watches over the quiet desert. The true wonder of that stepped monument lies hidden completely out of sight. Beneath the heavy stone, there is a dark and quiet maze. A 3-mile network of tunnels and shafts winds through the solid bedrock. These narrow corridors were carved deep into the earth. Walking through them with a small lamp feels like a journey into another world. The walls down here hold a beautiful surprise. They are decorated with thousands of tiny blue faience tiles. The brilliant turquoise ceramic glows softly in the dim light. The tiles are carefully arranged in a specific pattern. They were meant to mimic the woven reed mats of a royal palace. It is a delicate, domestic detail, hidden under thousands of tons of rock. The contrast is striking. Above ground, everything is massive and built for eternity. Below ground, the walls try to capture the fragile, everyday comfort of a woven mat in a quiet room. Another underground secret rests nearby, beneath the same stretch of sand. The Serapeum is a wide, dark gallery cut straight into the rock. It feels much heavier than the tiled tunnels. This subterranean space was built for a very specific purpose. It holds 24 massive granite sarcophagi. Each one is perfectly smooth and incredibly large. A single stone box weighs around 80 tons. They sit quietly in deep alcoves along the main corridor. These giant containers were not made for human kings. They were built to hold the mummified remains of sacred Apis bulls. The sheer size of the stone is hard to understand in the dark. Moving just one of these blocks down here would take immense effort. The air is still and cool in the long hallway. The faint glow of a torch barely reaches the high ceilings. It is a place of deep shadows and heavy, silent reverence for nature. A short distance south, the desert holds a monument to a massive mistake. The bent pyramid at Dashur rises smoothly from the flat ground. Its shape is completely unique. The lower half was built at a very steep angle. It reaches up sharply toward the sky. But halfway up, the slope abruptly changes. The top half finishes with a noticeably flatter incline. This was not a stylistic choice. During construction, the original steep walls began to crack. The heavy stone was simply crushing itself under its own weight. The engineers had to make a quick decision. To save the structure, they changed the angle for the rest of the build. The result is a slightly awkward but beautiful shape. It still retains much of its smooth outer casing. When the sun sets, the light catches the sudden bend in the stone. It is a quiet reminder that even master builders had to learn by trying. Further north, the Giza Plateau holds the most famous guardian in the world. The Great Sphinx rests quietly in a sunken pit of sand. Many people assume it was built from thousands of stacked blocks. But the truth is much more organic. The colossal statue was carved directly from a single massive limestone outcrop. This huge lump of rock was left over from quarrying stone for the nearby pyramids. Instead of breaking it apart, workers shaped it where it stood. You can still see the natural geological layers of the Earth in its weathered body. The horizontal bands of harder and softer stone run right through the lion. It feels less like a building, and more like a shaped piece of the landscape. The afternoon sun highlights the deep grooves worn by wind and time. It is a perfect marriage of human imagination and natural geology. The stone simply stayed where it always was. Just behind that carved lion, the Great Pyramid hides a brilliant engineering trick. Deep inside the massive structure, there is a finished burial room, called the King's Chamber. Above this room, the stone is not solid. There are several hidden, roughly hewn spaces known as relieving chambers. They are cramped and low-ceilinged. The builders used massive, rough granite beams to create these tight gaps. They were never meant to be seen by anyone. Their only job is to deflect the crushing weight of the pyramid away from the room below. Without them, the ceiling of the main chamber would surely collapse. If you look closely with a light, you can still see ancient red ochre quarry marks on the rough stone. These hidden gaps are the quiet heroes of the building. They take all the pressure and push it safely to the sides. They allow the empty space below to exist in perfect peace. Far to the east, the Red Sea coast holds a different kind of ancient engineering. The quiet harbor of Wadi al-Jaf looks like a simple stretch of blue water. But just below the surface lies the oldest known artificial breakwater in the world. It was built to protect wooden ships, bringing valuable copper from the Sinai Peninsula. The builders used massive limestone blocks to create a long, sturdy wall. They carved the stones into interlocking L-shapes. This clever design helped the blocks grip each other tightly against the pushing waves. The breakwater juts out into the sea, creating a calm pocket of water behind it. You can imagine the tired sailors guiding their heavy boats into this safe haven. The midday sun sparkles on the gentle ripples near the shore. The stone wall has spent thousands of years quietly breaking the force of the tide. It is a simple solution to a very natural problem. Back near the river valley, the site of Hawara hides a much more confusing structure. The mortuary temple of Amenemhat III was once a vast and dizzying maze. It was famously known as the Labyrinth. The building contained over 3,000 separate rooms. It was specifically engineered to confuse anyone trying to steal from the royal tombs. The interior was a complex system of identical stone corridors. Heavy granite blocks could drop down to block certain paths. There were false doorways carved into solid walls that led nowhere. Dark dead ends waited around quiet corners. Walking through it with a single oil lamp would have been terrifying. Every shadow would look like a doorway. Every turn would look exactly like the last. The builders wanted the space to feel endless and impossible to map. It was a brilliant architectural puzzle. The building used confusion and darkness as its strongest weapons against any unwanted visitors. Further south at Abydos, another temple plays a different trick on the senses. Deep beneath the desert sand lies the Osirion. It is a dark subterranean hall built of colossal granite blocks. The square pillars are completely smooth and unadorned. There are no carvings or bright colors here. The floor of the temple was dug down to the natural water table. A channel of dark groundwater surrounds the central stone platform. This creates the beautiful illusion of an island rising from the primeval waters. It feels like the very beginning of the world. The still water reflects the massive stone pillars in the flickering torchlight. The air is heavy and damp, smelling of wet earth and old rock. It is a place designed for quiet reflection. The architecture does not try to impress you with height or decoration. Instead, it uses heavy stone and dark water to create a feeling of deep, ancient peace. Following the river to the great city of Thebes, the scale of building changes completely. The Karnak temple complex is overwhelming in its size. The famous hypostyle hall is a dense forest of stone. It contains 134 massive sandstone columns. They are packed closely together, creating deep shadows even at midday. The central columns tower higher than the rest. They are so incredibly thick that 50 people could stand together on top of a single flared capital. The open papyrus-shaped tops support heavy stone lintels high above. Walking through this hall feels like shrinking down to the size of an insect. The surfaces are deeply carved with crisp hieroglyphs. Shafts of bright sunlight pierce through the high windows, cutting through the dusty air. The light moves slowly across the carved stone as the day passes. It is a space that makes you feel wonderfully small and quiet in its presence. Just a few steps away in the same complex, a messy secret was left behind. The massive stone gateways at Karnak are called pylons. To build these towering walls, workers used huge, sloping ramps made of packed mud brick and rubble. They would drag the heavy stones up the incline on wooden rollers. Usually these ramps were completely dismantled when the building was finished. But against one of the inner walls, the job was never completed. A permanent, sloping hill of ancient construction debris still rests quietly against the stone. It leans heavily on the unfinished gateway. You can still see the rough texture of the mud bricks in the twilight. It is a rare glimpse into the actual process of building. We usually only see the polished final result. But this forgotten pile of dirt and brick shows the hard, dusty reality of ancient engineering. It is a beautiful, unfinished thought left in the dirt. Across the river on the west bank, two lonely figures watch the sunrise. The Colossi of Memnon are two massive, weathered stone statues of a seated pharaoh. They tower alone over flat, green agricultural fields. There are no other buildings in sight. But they were not meant to stand alone. They once guarded the entrance to a massive mortuary temple. Over the centuries, ancient earthquakes shook the ground violently. Annual floods washed over the mud brick walls. The temple was completely destroyed and reclaimed by the earth. Only these two giant statues were heavy enough to survive the forces of nature. Now they sit quietly as the morning mist burns off the fields. The distant desert mountains rise sharply behind them. The soft light of dawn catches the rough, broken edges of their stone faces. They are a powerful reminder of how easily the earth can erase a building, leaving only the heaviest stones behind. Not far from those statues, the Ramesseum hides a very practical kind of architecture. Behind the grand stone temple complex, there is a vast network of storage rooms. These are long parallel rows of mud brick granaries. They feature beautiful curved, arched roofs. These simple vaults were incredibly important to the city. They were capable of storing enough grain to feed a small city for an entire year. The warm afternoon sun bakes the mud bricks, keeping the interior dry and safe. Heavy wooden doors once sealed the grain chambers tightly against pests. While the front of the temple was built for gods and kings, the back was built for survival. It is a quiet industrial space that kept the people alive. The repeating pattern of the curved roofs is soothing to look at. It shows that careful planning and simple materials were just as vital as massive stone columns and carved statues. Tucked into a natural bay in the cliffs nearby, a different temple blends perfectly with its surroundings. The mortuary temple of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahari is a masterpiece of landscape design. It features 3 grand step terraces connected by long ramps. Each level is lined with strict, geometric stone colonnades. But the true genius of the building is what sits behind it. The temple was designed to perfectly mirror the sheer vertical face of the massive desert cliff. The sun-baked limestone of the mountain towers directly over the flat roofs. The vertical lines of the carved pillars echo the natural vertical cracks in the rock wall. In the bright morning sun, it is hard to tell where the building ends and the mountain begins. It does not fight against the rugged landscape. Instead, it quietly organizes the chaos of the cliff into smooth, elegant lines. It is a building that truly belongs to its place. Just over that mountain ridge lies the hidden Valley of the Kings. The tombs here were carved deep into the earth to protect them from thieves. The tomb of Seti I is the deepest of them all. It descends over 400 feet into the solid bedrock. Walking down the sloping corridors feels like sinking slowly into the dark. The air grows still and warm. At the very bottom, the long journey ends in a magnificent vaulted burial chamber. The ceiling of this room is painted a deep, rich blue. It is covered in intricate yellow stars and complex astronomical figures. In the warm, flickering light of oil lamps, the ceiling looks like the actual night sky. The builders brought the heavens down into the deepest part of the earth. It is a quiet, beautiful space designed for eternal rest. The painted constellations have watched over the empty room in silence for thousands of years. The people who carved those deep tombs lived in a very secret place. The workers' village of Deir el-Medina was hidden away in a dry, secluded valley. It was nestled deep within a barren, rocky ravine. The location was chosen carefully. It was completely hidden from the main river valley and the rest of the city. The goal was to keep the tomb builders isolated from the general public. This protected the architectural secrets and locations of the royal burials. The village was tightly packed with small stone and mud brick houses. At dusk, smoke would rise gently from dozens of cooking fires. It was a quiet, self-contained world of artists, stonemasons and their families. They spent their days carving grand monuments for kings, and their evenings in this dusty, hidden canyon. The narrow streets must have echoed with the sounds of neighbors talking and children playing. It was a normal life, lived in total secrecy. Back on the open plain, the Temple of Medinet Habu features a very aggressive style of carving. The walls here are covered in unusually deep sunken reliefs. The hieroglyphs and figures are cut far back into the sandstone. This was a deliberate architectural choice by Ramses III. In ancient times, a new pharaoh would often chisel out the name of an older king and replace it with his own. It was an easy way to steal a monument. To prevent this, the builders at Medinet Habu carved the names so deeply that erasing them would destroy the entire wall. The edges of the carvings are sharp and deliberate. In the bright sunlight, these deep cuts cast strong, dark shadows. The text pops out clearly against the smooth stone. It is a beautiful design, born entirely out of a desire for permanence. The deep shadows ensure that the original name will always be read in the light. Traveling further south, the Temple of Edfu offers a rare look at a perfect building. It is one of the best preserved ancient structures in the entire country. The massive sandstone walls and towering pylons are completely intact. The flat roof still covers the dark interior rooms. This incredible preservation is actually thanks to neglect. For centuries, drifting desert sand slowly piled up against the walls. Later, local villagers built their mud brick dwellings right on top of the buried temple. The sand and the houses acted like a protective blanket. They shielded the crisp, unweathered carvings from wind, rain, and destruction. When the sand was finally cleared away, the temple emerged, looking almost brand new. In the golden light of late afternoon, the smooth walls glow warmly. It is a quiet miracle of preservation. The earth simply swallowed the building whole, kept it safe in the dark, and eventually gave it back to the sun. Further up the river, the Temple of Kom Ombo sits quietly on a bend in the water. This building is perfectly symmetrical along its main axis. It is actually two temples woven into one. The grand stone facade features two identical entrance doors sitting side by side. These lead into twin parallel colonnaded halls. The paths continue back into twin sanctuaries. This unique design was created because the complex was dedicated to two different gods. They shared the space equally. Everything had to be perfectly balanced, so neither side felt less important. Walking through the halls, you can feel the strict geometry of the space. The warm glow of sunset highlights the matching columns on either side. It is a beautiful expression of compromise in stone. The architecture forces a sense of harmony and balance on anyone who enters. The two parallel paths run quietly next to each other, never crossing but always sharing the same quiet roof. Near the southern border, the dusty granite quarries of Aswan hold a massive disappointment. The unfinished obelisk lies abandoned in its rocky trench. It is a colossal, rectangular block of pink granite. It was meant to be the largest obelisk ever raised, but it is still firmly attached to the bedrock floor. Just before the workers could free the massive stone, a deep flaw cracked across its top surface. The sudden sound of the rock splitting must have been heartbreaking. All the months of careful carving were instantly ruined. The workers simply dropped their wooden wedges and walked away. Today, the giant stone rests quietly in the dust. It offers a fascinating look at how these monuments were actually made. You can see the rough scoop marks along the sides where workers pounded the rock. It is a sleeping giant that never got to stand up. It remains forever tied to the earth that made it. Just offshore from those quarries, Elephantine Island holds a very different kind of stone structure. The ancient Nilometers here were built to measure the lifeblood of the country. They are narrow, steep stone staircases built directly into the riverbank. They descend straight down into the dark water of the Nile. The stone walls along the steps are carved with horizontal measurement lines and careful hieroglyphs. These were not just for keeping records. The priests used these precise marks to predict the height of the annual flood. The water level told them exactly how good the year's harvest would be. A few inches could mean the difference between plenty and hunger. In the bright midday sun, the dark water laps gently against the old stone steps. It is a quiet, scientific instrument built into the natural landscape. The stairs simply wait for the water to rise, reading the future in the gentle movement of the river. Far to the south, the temples of Abu Simbel use the sun itself as an architectural element. The great temple was carved deep into a solid rock cliff. The interior is a long, dark corridor leading to a small sanctuary at the very back. The builders aligned the entire structure with incredible precision. Twice a year, the rising sun crests the horizon and shines directly into the entrance. A single intense beam of golden morning sunlight pierces straight down the dark hallway. It travels 200 feet into the rock to illuminate 3 seated stone statues on the back wall. The light lingers there for just a few minutes before the earth turns, and the shadows return. It is a breathtaking moment of cosmic timing. The heavy stone building acts like a giant lens, catching the light perfectly. It is a quiet, fleeting magic trick that still works flawlessly after thousands of years in the dark. The Egyptian New Year did not begin in the cold of winter. It started in the heavy heat of late summer. The timing was tied to the stars. People watched the eastern horizon just before dawn. They waited for the star Sirius to appear. Its bright return was a quiet promise. It meant the life-giving river flood was just days away. You can imagine standing on a flat, mud-brick roof in the dark. The air is still and warm. The whole valley is waiting for the water to rise. This single star set the rhythm for millions of lives. It told farmers when to prepare their tools. It told priests when to start the rituals. The sky was a giant calendar. Every year, the star returned right on time. The dark river below would soon swell with muddy water. The dry earth would drink it in. A new cycle of life was about to begin. When the floodwaters finally arrived, the season of Akit began. The river spilled over its banks and spread across the land. The entire valley turned into a vast, shallow lake. All normal farming came to a sudden halt. The dry fields vanished under the calm water. Villages sat on raised mounds of earth. They looked like tiny islands in a giant mirror. The usual dusty paths were gone. People had to travel by water instead. Villagers paddled small skiffs made of bundled papyrus reeds. They glided quietly between the island towns. The water brought a deep stillness to the landscape. The hard work of plowing and planting had to wait. The earth was resting under the flood. The water dropped rich, dark mud onto the fields. This mud would feed the next crop. For now, the people simply watched the water. They moved slowly across the flooded valley in their little boats. Months later, the water was gone, and the fields were golden. The annual harvest was a massive, shared effort. It took thousands of hands to bring in the wheat. Teams of men moved slowly through the tall stalks. They used curved wooden sickles, fitted with sharp flint blades. The work was hot and dusty under the bright morning sun. The sound of cutting filled the air. It was a steady, rhythmic crunch. Women walked right behind the men. They carried large woven baskets. Their job was to glean the fallen stalks. They picked up every dropped piece of grain. Nothing was allowed to go to waste. The survival of the whole country depended on this crop. The fields hummed with quiet, focused energy. Everyone had a specific role to play. The golden wheat was gathered armful by armful. The baskets grew heavy as the morning went on. The harvest was finally coming in. After the wheat was cut, it had to be processed. The next step took place on a hard-packed, dirt threshing floor. The cut stalks were piled high in a thick layer. Then, a farmer drove a small herd of cattle over the pile. The heavy hooves of the cows did the hard work. They walked in slow circles over the wheat. This action separated the edible grain from the dry chaff. It was a noisy, dusty process. The cows lowed and the farmers shouted gentle commands. Golden dust rose high into the warm afternoon air. The dust caught the light of the setting sun. It looked like a glowing cloud over the village. The smell of crushed straw was everywhere. The work was tiring, but it meant food for the year. The separated grain would soon be swept up. It was a simple method, but it worked perfectly for thousands of years. Once the grain was clean, it needed a safe place. It was taken to massive temple granaries. These mud brick vaults served as the ancient equivalent of banks. Wealth was not measured in coins or paper money. It was measured in golden wheat and barley. Farmers brought their surplus grain to these storage chambers. A scribe sat quietly in the shade of the vault. He held a papyrus scroll and a reed pen. He carefully recorded every basket that was poured inside. The farmers could withdraw their grain later in the year. They used it to pay their taxes. They also traded it for other goods they needed. The granary was the heart of the local economy. It kept the community fed during the dry months. The thick mud walls kept the grain cool and safe from pests. The wealth of the nation was piled high in these dark, quiet rooms. Down on the dusty riverbank, the daily market was waking up. The market operated entirely on a simple barter system. There was no official currency changing hands. Instead, the value of goods was measured against copper. They used a standard weight, called a baboon. A merchant would set up a simple wooden balance scale. He placed a small copper ring on one side. Then he piled grain or vegetables on the other side. The scale tipped and settled in the morning light. People traded fish for woven baskets. They traded clay pots for fresh onions. The air was full of quiet bargaining. The river flowed gently just a few steps away. Boats arrived to unload more goods onto the sandy bank. The market was a place of constant slow motion. Everyone knew the exact value of what they had. The copper rings made sure every trade was fair and even. Most of that traded grain was used for two things. Bread and beer were the absolute staples of the daily diet. They were often made together in the same dusty courtyards. You can picture a sunlit space behind a mud brick house. A worker kneels beside large clay vats. First, they bake a batch of simple, coarse dough. They do not bake it all the way through. Then, they crumble this lightly baked bread into the vats. They add water and let the mixture sit in the heat. The warm air helps the liquid ferment into a thick beer. It was a cloudy, nutritious drink. People of all ages drank it every single day. It was safer to drink than the river water. The smell of yeast and baking bread filled the neighborhood. These courtyard bakeries were the quiet engines of daily life. They turned raw grain into the fuel that built temples. Not everyone spent their days working in the fields or bakeries. Scribes had the rare and valuable skill of reading and writing. They did not usually practice on expensive papyrus scrolls. Papyrus was costly and saved for important official documents. Instead, scribes used smooth flakes of white limestone. These handy stone scraps were called ostraka. You could find them lying around any building site. A scribe would rest a wooden lap desk on his knees. He dipped a reed brush into black ink. Then he wrote quickly across the flat stone surface. They left behind thousands of these little limestone notes. We have found their ancient grocery lists and rough drafts. We have even found their board doodles. These stones show the quiet, ordinary moments of their days. The ink dried fast in the warm desert air. The scribes tossed the stones aside when they were done. The desert sand kept them safe. Far from the dusty villages, the royal workshops were busy. These spaces hummed with quiet, incredibly precise work. Master jewelers sat at low wooden benches near open windows. They needed the bright sunlight to see their tiny materials. They made heavy gold necklaces called pectorals for the royal family. The gold was just the base for the real art. The artisans used small copper tools to set tiny stones. They worked with deep blue lapis lazuli. They used bright green turquoise and rich red carnelian. Every single piece was cut to fit perfectly. The jewelers did not rush their work. They spent hours shaping a piece of stone the size of a seed. The workshop smelled of hot metal and polishing sand. The only sound was the soft scraping of tools. They were building tiny, perfect worlds out of color and light. These bright treasures were meant to last for eternity. The finest artisans lived in a special village called Dir el-Medina. They were the men who carved and painted the royal tombs. Their sense of time was different from ours. They operated on a 10-day week. They worked hard in the deep valley for 8 straight days. Then they finally got 2 days of rest. During their time off, they stayed in small stone huts. These huts were perched quietly on the high desert ridge. The ridge overlooked the hidden royal valley below. The men could sit outside their huts in the late afternoon. The sun baked the stones and warmed the dry air. It was a place of deep, absolute silence. They were far away from the busy river and the crowded markets. They used this quiet time to rest their hands and eyes. The desert wind blew softly over the ridge. They watched the shadows grow long across the sand. While the artisans rested, the temples followed their own strict rhythms. The most important rituals happened in the dark before dawn. The high priest would walk deep into the stone sanctuary. The air inside was cool and smelled of old incense. He stopped in front of a gilded wooden shrine. First, he carefully broke the clay seal on the doors. He lit a small torch to push back the shadows. Then he gently opened the doors to reveal a small stone statue. This was the moment he woke the god for the day. He did not speak loudly. He offered the statue fresh linen clothing. He burned sweet incense to clear the air. It was a very private, quiet moment. The rest of the city was still fast asleep. The priest treated the stone figure with deep care. He made sure the god was ready to face the new morning. Serving the gods required a life of extreme physical purity. Temple priests had to follow very strict daily rules. They were required to shave their entire bodies every other day. They could not have a single hair on their heads. This kept them clean and free of desert pests. They also had to bathe in cold water 4 times a day. They bathed twice during the daylight hours. They bathed twice more in the middle of the night. You can imagine a priest stepping into a sacred stone pool. The water is dark and perfectly still. A single oil lamp casts a warm glow on the steps. The cold water is a shock in the cool night air. The priest moves slowly, washing away the dust of the world. The temple precinct is completely silent around him. This quiet ritual was the only way to stay pure. The gods demanded nothing less. The gods stayed in their temples, but the king did not. The royal court moved constantly up and down the river. They traveled between different palaces throughout the year. The king never traveled alone. He was accompanied by a massive flotilla of wooden barges. This fleet carried the entire administrative bureaucracy of the nation. It was a floating city on the move. The barges were loaded with heavy wooden furniture. They carried thousands of rolled papyrus archives. Royal attendants crowded the decks under the bright midday sun. The large white sails billowed in the steady wind. The boats sailed slowly against the river current. The water slapped gently against the wooden hulls. Moving the court was a huge, complicated task, but the river made it all possible. The Nile was the only real highway the country needed. The whole government simply packed up and floated to its next home. Whether on a royal barge or in a dusty village, people protected their eyes. The desert sun was blindingly bright. To reduce the harsh glare, everyone wore thick eye makeup. Both men and women applied it every single day. They used crushed green malachite or black galena. They mixed the powder with a little animal fat. Then they used a small wooden stick to paint it on. They drew thick dark lines all around their eyes. It looked beautiful, but it was mostly practical. The dark colors absorbed the bright sunlight. The minerals also helped ward off painful eye infections. The makeup kept the blowing sand and flies away. You would see people standing in sunlit courtyards, carefully applying their daily paint. They held small, beautifully carved stone jars. It was a quiet morning routine. The dark lines became a defining feature of their faces. It was a shield against the desert. In the quiet hours of the afternoon, the heat became heavy. The busy work of the morning slowed down. Men would gather in the deep shade of large sycamore trees. The dusty streets were still and quiet. The men sat cross-legged on the ground to play Senet. It was a popular board game of passing pieces. They moved small carved cones across a grid of squares. The wooden pieces made a soft tapping sound on the board. But sin it was more than just a simple way to pass the time. It doubled as a metaphor for the soul's journey after death. The squares represented the challenges of the underworld. Winning meant safely reaching the afterlife. The men played slowly, thinking about their next moves. The shade offered a cool escape from the glaring sun. They talked quietly, while the afternoon drifted by. The game was a small reminder of eternity. Sometimes the quiet afternoons gave way to massive celebrations. The Festival of Bastille was a joyous, noisy event. It took place in the lush green delta city of Bubastis. Thousands of people traveled there by water. The river was crowded with dozens of small wooden boats. The boats drifted slowly toward the grand temple in the distance. The people on board did not sit quietly. They played wooden flutes and shook loud castanets. They clapped their hands and sang into the warm air. The sound carried far across the flat water. The afternoon sun sparkled on the gentle river waves. It was a time to let go of daily worries. The whole country seemed to be moving toward the music. The boats bumped gently against each other in the current. The festival was a rare moment of pure, shared joy. The river itself felt alive with the happy noise. Other festivals were much more solemn and mysterious. During the Opet festival, the statues of the gods went on a journey. They were carried out of their dark sanctuaries. Priests placed them inside small shrines on a grand, gilded barge. The barge floated slowly down the dark river at night. It traveled from the great temple of Karnak down to Luxor. The journey was quiet and deeply sacred. Smaller boats surrounded the main barge. These boats were filled with priests holding flickering torches. The orange firelight reflected beautifully on the black water. The priests chanted softly as they drifted along. The rhythmic sound of their voices drifted toward the riverbanks. People stood in the dark to watch the glowing procession pass by. The gods were visiting each other under the stars. The night air was thick with the smell of burning incense. It was a moment of pure magic. When the festivals were over, normal evening routines returned. The end of the day brought a welcome drop in temperature. The evening meal was usually eaten up high. Families climbed the stairs to the flat roofs of their mud brick houses. The roofs caught the cool northern breeze that blew in at dusk. They sat together on simple woven mats. They shared a quiet meal of fresh bread and sharp onions. The heat of the day slowly left the thick walls. They watched the sun set red over the distant western desert. The sky turned purple, and then a deep, soft blue. The neighborhood grew quiet as the light faded. You could hear the faint sounds of other families talking softly. The roof was the most comfortable room in the house. It was a peaceful place to end the day. The stars began to appear one by one above them. Wealthy families spent their evenings a little differently. They hosted intimate banquets in beautifully painted rooms. The guests wore fine, pleated white linen garments. They wore heavy black wigs that framed their faces. On top of these wigs, they wore something very unusual. They balanced small, white cones of scented animal fat on their heads. As the evening went on, the warm air did its work. The fat cones slowly began to melt. The melting fat ran down into their wigs and onto their clothes. It sounds messy to us, but it was highly luxurious. The fat was mixed with strong, sweet perfumes. It kept their skin soft, and made the whole room smell wonderful. The guests sat in the warm, flickering glow of oil lamps. They listened to music and drank sweet wine. The melting perfume was a sign of a very good party. The night was rich and fragrant. These evening gatherings always featured a very specific flower. Blue lotus flowers were a staple of every banquet. They were beautiful, but they were also special in other ways. The flowers naturally closed up tight at night. They only opened their bright blue petals in the morning sun. Guests loved to drape these vibrant flowers over their wine goblets. The stems rested in the dark liquid. The blue lotus had mild psychoactive properties. Steeping the flowers in wine released these calming effects. It made the guests feel relaxed and peaceful. You can picture a beautifully painted clay goblet on a wooden table. The blue petals contrast with the dark red wine. The warm light of dusk catches the edge of the cup. The flowers added a gentle magic to the evening. They helped the wealthy guests forget their worries. The night drifted by in a soft, fragrant haze. While the wealthy drank wine, priests were busy making perfume. In the quiet temple workshops of Memphis, the work continued at dusk. Priests methodically ground fragrant materials in heavy stone mortars. They were making a very complex incense called kaifi. It was not a simple recipe. They mixed sticky tree resins with sweet honey and rich myrrh. They added herbs and spices in exact amounts. The workshop was dimly lit by flickering oil lamps. The air inside was incredibly thick with sweet smells. They rolled the dark mixture into small balls. This special incense was burned specifically at the end of the day. It was meant to sweeten the evening air and please the gods. The priests worked in calm, steady silence. The grinding stone made a low, rhythmic sound. The kaifi smoke would soon rise over the temple walls. It signaled that the day was truly over. As the incense smoke rose, the priests looked up. The night sky was not just a beautiful canopy. It was a giant, moving clock. The priest divided the stars into 36 distinct groups. They called these star groups decans. A priest would stand on the flat stone roof of a grand temple. He held a simple wooden sighting instrument in his hands. He watched the eastern horizon very closely. He waited for specific decans to rise above the edge of the world. This is how they precisely tracked the hours of darkness. The sky was perfectly clear and filled with bright stars. There were no city lights to ruin the view. The priest stood in absolute silence. He noted the passing of time as the stars slowly wheeled overhead. The gods were moving across the heavens. The temple roof was a quiet bridge between the earth and the sky. Down below the roof, some people were hoping for a miracle. The temples offered a special ritual called dream incubation. It was for people who were sick or had a terrible problem. They came to the temple precinct looking for answers. They were led into a small, dark, designated room. The stone walls were carved with images of the gods. The person lay down on a simple woven mat on the floor. A small oil lamp cast long, strange shadows across the ceiling. The room was perfectly quiet and still. The person closed their eyes and tried to sleep. They hoped the god would visit them in the dark. They wanted a dream that would cure their illness. They wanted a vision that would tell them what to do. It was a deeply personal act of faith. They trusted the quiet darkness to bring them peace. They waited for the gods to speak. Not every illness could be cured by a dream. When death came, the city had its own loud rituals. Professional mourners were hired to follow the funeral processions. These women wore simple garments dyed a dusty blue-gray. They stood at the stern of the wooden funerary boat. The boat slowly crossed the wide river toward the western shore. The women raised their arms and wept loudly. They threw dry dirt and dust onto their own heads. Their cries echoed across the water in the late afternoon light. It was their job to show the deep grief of the family. The blue-gray dresses marked them as women of sorrow. The boat moved steadily toward the land of the dead. The living watched from the eastern bank. The loud weeping was a stark contrast to the quiet river. It was a final, dramatic goodbye before the silence of the tomb. The dead were not forgotten after the tomb was sealed. Once a year, the living went to visit them. The beautiful Feast of the Valley was a massive annual holiday. Families packed up food and crossed the river together. They walked into the dry, dusty western necropolis. They found the rock-cut tombs of their ancestors in the desert cliffs. But this was not a sad or quiet visit. It was a joyful family reunion. They spread woven mats in the dusty courtyards outside the tombs. They sat in the late afternoon sun and shared a picnic. They ate fresh bread and sweet fruit. They drank wine from heavy clay jugs. They believed the spirits of the dead joined them for the meal. It was a quiet, happy celebration of life and memory. The desert echoed with the sounds of families talking and laughing. The past and the present sat together in the sun. The Great Pyramid of Giza holds a quiet secret in its shape. You might think it has 4 flat sides. Most people do. But the builders made a very subtle choice. They pressed the massive stone faces inward just a little bit. This gentle dip splits each side right down the middle. It turns the famous shape into an 8-sided structure. You cannot see this from the ground. The change is too slight for the human eye to catch up close. You have to look from high above. The best time to see it is during the spring or fall equinox. As the sun sets, the light hits the stone at a sharp angle. Half of the face glows in the warm light. The other half falls into deep shadow. It is a hidden detail built for the sky. The stones wait for the perfect light to show their true form. Right at the base of that same pyramid, workers dug a deep pit into the rock. They hid something huge inside it. It was a wooden ship, meant for a king. The boat was 130 feet long. But they did not bury it whole. They took the entire ship apart first. They broke it down into more than 1,000 pieces. It was like a giant wooden puzzle. They stacked the cedar planks with great care. They coiled thick ropes beside the wood. The king would need this ship in the next world. He would use it to sail across the sky with the sun. The dry desert air kept the wood safe for thousands of years. The pieces just sat there in the dark. They waited for someone to put them back together. It is strange to think of a grand ship resting in pieces under the dry sand. Just down the hill, the Great Sphinx guards the plateau. We are used to seeing its whole body resting on the rock. But for most of its life, the statue was hidden. The desert winds blew endless sand over the monument. The sand piled up, right to the neck of the beast. Only the giant head poked out above the dunes. It stayed that way for a very long time. Then a young prince named Thutmose went to sleep in its shadow. He dreamed that the statue spoke to him. It asked him to clear the heavy sand away. When he became pharaoh, he kept his promise. He dug the massive body out of the dunes. He set up a stone tablet between its huge paws to tell the story. The wind is always trying to take the land back. The sand is always waiting to cover the stone again. Down in the old capital of Memphis, builders and clerks had a clever way to work. They needed a way to show a zero balance in their ledgers. They also needed a mark for the exact ground level on building sites. They did not use a blank space. Instead, they used a special picture sign. They drew the symbol called NFR. This sign usually meant something was beautiful or complete. It looks like a heart with a windpipe attached to it. When an accountant saw this mark, they knew the math was perfect. The debts were fully paid. When a stoneworker saw it, they knew the ground was perfectly flat. The foundation was ready for a new wall. It is a lovely way to think about nothing. The zero was not an empty void to them. It meant things were balanced. It meant the work was beautiful and complete. Life in the royal courts of that city could be very strange. The summer heat brought thick swarms of flies to the riverbanks. The bugs were a constant pest for everyone. But Pharaoh Pepi II refused to be bothered by them. He found a very odd way to keep the flies away from his skin. He kept a servant standing close by at all times. This person was completely covered in sticky sweet honey. The flies would smell the sugar and fly right past the king. They would land on the poor servant instead. The pharaoh could sit in the shade and enjoy his day in peace. It is a bizarre image to picture. A person shining with golden syrup stands quietly in the corner of a grand room. The king rests on his wooden chair. The buzzing sound moves away from the throne and settles on the sweet trap. Farther north, in the delta city of Pi-Ramesses, another king stood out in a different way. Ramses II was one of the most famous rulers in history. He built grand temples and won great battles. But he also had a very rare physical trait. The pharaoh had bright red hair. This was highly unusual for the people of this land. Most folks had dark black or brown hair. Red hair meant something very specific to them. They linked that color to Seth. Seth was the god of the harsh desert and wild chaos. He was a fierce and stormy figure. Having hair the color of the desert sands was a powerful sign. It made the king look a bit dangerous. It gave him a wild edge. When he sat in his grand halls, his red hair caught the light. It was a quiet warning of the fierce power he held inside. Back in the busy streets of the capital, everyday people had their own clever tricks. Women used a very old method to find out if they were going to have a baby. They also used it to guess if the child would be a boy or a girl. They took 2 small cloth bags. They filled one bag with wheat seeds. They filled the other bag with barley seeds. Then the woman would urinate on both bags for a few days. If neither bag grew any sprouts, she was not pregnant. If the barley sprouted first, they believed a boy was coming. If the wheat grew green shoots, they expected a girl. It sounds like pure magic. But modern science actually looked into this old trick. The hormones in the urine really do make the seeds grow. The ancient people found a natural test that worked. They just watched the green shoots rise. Out in the lush green oasis of the Fayoum, a whole town worshipped a single animal. The city was built around a large, calm lake. The priests there kept one very special crocodile. They named him Petsuchos. This was no wild beast. He was a pampered, sacred pet. The priests believed a god lived inside him. They treated the huge reptile like a king. They pierced his tough ears and hung heavy gold rings from them. They slipped golden bracelets onto his short, scaly legs. People came from all over to see him. The priests would walk right up to the water. They would open the crocodile's mouth with their bare hands. Then they fed him sweet honey cakes and roasted meat. They even poured wine down his throat. The giant animal just rested on the warm sand. He chewed his sweet cakes while the gold ring shined in the bright sun. Further south, the dry town of Oxyrhynchus holds a different kind of treasure. The people there did not leave behind grand gold statues. They left behind their trash. For hundreds of years, the locals dumped their old papers into deep pits at the edge of town. They threw away tax receipts and shopping lists. They tossed out personal letters and bad poetry. The desert sand blew over the garbage dumps and buried them. The climate here is incredibly dry. No rain ever came to rot the paper. The dry dirt kept every single scrap perfectly safe. Thousands of years later, people dug up these old dumps. They found a massive pile of everyday life. You can read a letter from a son begging his father for a new tunic. You can see the exact price of a donkey. The dry dust saved the quiet, normal moments that history usually forgets. Near the rock tombs of Beni Hassan, the farmers had a very clever way to pick fruit. Fig trees grow tall and wide here. The sweet green fruits hang high up in the leafy branches. It is hard for a person to reach the best ones. So the farmers trained baboons to do the hard work for them. The monkeys were smart and very good at climbing. Old paintings on the tomb walls show exactly how this worked. A baboon sits high up in the green leaves. It picks the ripe figs with its quick hands. Then it tosses the fruit down to the farmer waiting on the ground. The farmer catches the figs in a woven basket. It is a peaceful, funny scene. The man and the monkey work together in the warm morning light. The baboon gets a snack, and the farmer gets a full basket of sweet fruit. Down the river in the city of Amarna, a rebel king changed all the rules. For centuries, artists carved pharaohs to look like perfect heroes. They had broad shoulders and flat stomachs. They looked strong and flawless. But Pharaoh Akhenaten wanted something completely different. He ordered his artists to carve him in a strange new way. His statues show a man with a very long face and thin arms. He has a sagging belly and wide, heavy hips. His lips are thick, and his chin is sharp. It was a shocking change. No one had ever seen a king look so odd and soft. Some think he really looked this way due to an illness. Others think it was a bold artistic choice to show he was both mother and father to the land. The strange statues stood in the bright sun. They broke every rule of beauty the old world knew. Inside the dark stone halls of Dendera, there is a very strange carving on the wall. It looks exactly like a giant modern light bulb. You can see a long, clear bubble shape. Inside the bubble, a wavy line looks just like a glowing wire. The base even looks like a socket with a cord attached. It is easy to see why people think it is a secret ancient lamp. But the real story is much older and stranger. The carving shows a myth about how the world began. The bulb shape is actually a protective bubble of air. The wavy wire inside is a snake. The socket at the base is a lotus flower blooming in the dark water. The snake is waking up inside the flower to bring light to the world. It is a beautiful story carved in cold stone. The shape just happens to trick our modern eyes. At the massive temple of Karnak, the nights were long and quiet. The priests needed to know the exact time to perform their secret rituals. They could not use the sun to tell time in the dark. So they used beautiful bowls made of glowing white stone. These were water clocks. The bowl had a tiny hole drilled near the bottom. The priests filled the bowl with water at sunset. The water slowly dripped out of the hole, drop by drop. Marks carved on the inside of the bowl showed the passing hours. As the water level went down, the priests knew exactly what time it was. The stone was so thin that a candle could shine right through it. The soft light made the water glow in the dark room. The only sound was the steady drip of water hitting the floor. It was a very peaceful way to measure the night. In that same grand temple, you can find a petty grudge carved into the walls. Queen Hatshepsut was a powerful woman who ruled as a full pharaoh. She built amazing monuments all over the land. But the kings who came after her wanted to erase her from time. They sent workers to smash her statues. They used heavy chisels to scrape her name off the stone walls. They wanted people to forget she ever held the throne. But the workers were often in a hurry. They chipped away her royal name, but they left the rest of the sentence alone. The ancient language used different word endings for men and women. The lazy workers left all the feminine pronouns untouched. The wall still says, "She built this grand hall." The blank space where her name used to be is surrounded by female words. Her ghost still speaks clearly from the ruined stone. Across the river in the busy streets of Thebes, the local police had unusual partners. The city markets were crowded and loud. Thieves often tried to steal goods from the busy stalls. The guards needed help keeping order in the dusty streets. They did not just walk the beat alone. They brought trained animals with them on patrol. The guards held lean hunting dogs on thick leather leashes. But they also carried small monkeys on their shoulders. These monkeys were trained to help catch running thieves. If a criminal tried to run away into the crowd, the monkey could leap down and grab them. The animals helped the guards watch the busy alleys and the desert borders. It is quite a sight to imagine. A stern guard walks through the fruit stalls with a wooden stick. A dog walks by his side, and a quick monkey watches from above. In the quiet healing rooms of that same city, doctors used a very strange medicine. When a worker got a deep cut, the wound would often get red and hot. The healers knew they had to stop the infection. They did not have modern pills. Instead, they reached for old, stale bread. They let the bread sit in the damp dark until it grew a thick blue mold. Then they crumbled the moldy bread and pressed it right into the open wound. It sounds like a terrible idea, but the doctors were actually doing something brilliant by accident. That blue mold was full of natural penicillin. The mold killed the bad bacteria in the cut. The ancient healers discovered antibiotics thousands of years before modern science did. They did not know about tiny germs or chemical cells. They just knew that the blue fuzz on the bread made the red heat go away. Those same doctors also mixed up some very wild cures for everyday problems. One old paper scroll lists a special recipe for men who were losing their hair. The doctor had to gather fat from 6 different animals. They needed fat from a fierce lion and a heavy hippopotamus. They had to find fat from a crocodile, a cat, a snake, and a wild ibex. The healer mixed all these different fats together in a small stone jar. Then they rubbed the thick, greasy paste onto the bald man's head. They thought the fierce energy of these wild animals would make the hair grow back strong. It was a very messy and smelly cure. It probably did not grow any new hair at all. But it shows how much they believed in the magic of nature. They hoped the power of a lion could wake up a sleepy scalp. Just outside the city, in the dusty village of Deir el-Medina, history was made by tired men. These were the skilled artists who carved the royal tombs. They did hard, dusty work in the hot sun. The state was supposed to pay them with grain and beer. But one summer, the food shipments just stopped coming. The men waited for months. Their families were hungry. Finally, they had enough. They put down their heavy copper chisels. They dropped their wooden mallets in the dirt. They walked away from the worksite and sat down in the shadow of a grand temple. They refused to lift another stone until they were fed. It was the first recorded labor strike in the history of the world. The guards did not know what to do. The quiet workers just sat in the dust. They proved that even kings need to pay their bills. We know a lot about these workers because they wrote everything down. They kept daily attendance records on flat pieces of white stone. One of these stones shows a list of reasons why men missed work. The excuses sound very familiar, but with an ancient twist. One man stayed home because he was brewing beer for a festival. Another worker called in sick because a scorpion bit him on the foot. One man simply wrote that he was busy embalming his dead brother. Another had to stay home to help his wife, who was bleeding. The foreman wrote all these notes down in quick black ink. The stone was just tossed into the dirt when the month was over. It is a very human little object. It shows that missing a day of work has always been the same. Life just gets in the way of the job. The women in this village were just as tough as the stone carvers. They had strong legal rights, and they used them. One old document tells the story of a woman who took her own father to court. Her father had married a new woman. He decided to leave all his property to his new wife. He tried to cut his own daughter out of the will completely. The daughter did not just accept this. She went to the local judges and filed a formal lawsuit against him. She stood up in the court and argued her case. The judges listened to her and looked at the laws. They ruled in her favor. They forced the father to give her the property she deserved. It is a sharp reminder of how modern this old world could be. A daughter stood her ground and used the law to fight for her home. Not far from that village, a grand temple sits against a steep cliff at Deir el-Bahari. The stone terraces here used to be a lush, green garden. The Queen sent her ships on a very long journey down the sea. They sailed to a distant land called Punt. They did not just bring back gold or dead wood. They brought back living myrrh trees. The sailors carefully dug up the trees and packed their roots in deep baskets of foreign dirt. They carried the heavy baskets onto the ships and kept the trees alive on the water. When they got home, they planted the trees on the sunny stone terraces. The sweet smell of myrrh filled the hot air. It was a massive effort just to bring a nice smell to the temple. The green leaves cast soft shadows on the white stone. The foreign trees grew quietly in their new home. Deep in the hidden Valley of the Kings, a young boy king was buried with a very special weapon. When explorers opened the tomb of Tutankhamun, they found a beautiful dagger wrapped in the linen over his leg. The handle was made of bright yellow gold, but the dark, smooth blade was the real treasure. It was made of iron. This was very strange. The Iron Age had not started yet. The people did not know how to melt iron from the earth. So where did the metal come from? Modern tests showed the truth. The iron came from a rock that fell from space. A meteorite crashed into the desert sand. A clever metal worker found the heavy space rock. He carefully hammered the cold star metal into a sharp blade for the king. The young pharaoh took a piece of the night sky with him into the dark tomb. When it was time to prepare a body for that dark tomb, the priests were very careful. They took out the lungs, the liver, and the stomach. They pulled the brain out through the nose and threw it away. They thought the brain was just useless stuffing. But they never touched the heart. They left the heart resting quietly inside the chest. They believed the heart was the true center of the person. It held all their thoughts, their memories, and their feelings. The soul would need the heart to speak for it in the next world. The gods would weigh the heart on a giant scale to see if the person was good. So the priests wrapped the body in tight linen, but they left the chest whole. They placed a carved stone beetle over the heart to keep it safe. The heart stayed in the dark, waiting to tell its story. Far up the river at Komombo, the priests prepared animals for the afterlife too. This temple was built right on the riverbank. It was dedicated to the fierce crocodile god. The priests kept sacred crocodiles here, just like in the oasis. When these holy reptiles died, they were carefully dried and wrapped in cloth. Explorers found many of these large scaly mummies hidden in the temple. But they found a very sweet detail on their backs. The priests had also mummified tiny baby crocodiles. They arranged the little babies in a neat row along the mother's back. This is exactly how mother crocodiles carry their young in the wild water. They let the babies ride on their rough backs to keep them safe. The priests wanted them to travel the exact same way in the next world. The little family rests together in the dry dark forever. The river journey south ends near the rocky shores of Sail Island. The water here is wild and fast. Huge pink granite boulders stick out of the rushing river. Ancient sailors and stone workers were very afraid of these dangerous rapids. They had to steer their heavy wooden boats through the sharp rocks. Before they tried to cross, they would stop at the island. They climbed up the smooth pink boulders. They used hard stones to scratch quiet prayers into the rock. They asked the river god with the ram head to keep them safe. There are hundreds of these little notes carved into the stone. They are not grand royal boasts. They are just simple, quiet hopes from tired travelers. The sun sets and turns the pink rocks a deep, warm orange. The water rushes by, and the old prayers still watch over the boats on the river. Our walk through ancient Egypt is coming to an end. Wherever you've drifted to, you don't need to come back. There's nothing more to listen for tonight. Sleep well.